Hey everyone, Mr. Allen here. The data has been collected. There should be a link below the link to this video that will take you to this page. You'll notice right away this is view only at this point. And so when you get here, you'll want to go to File and make a copy of the spreadsheet for yourself. It'll save it to your Google Drive, so you'll have to be logged into your Gaphy account to sort of get this going. You can name it whatever you want, and then you'll have your own copy of the data that you can edit as you choose or play with as you choose without affecting anybody else in the class. A couple of things to note here. I've made a few slight modifications just to the titles. I kind of cleaned them up a little bit. Usually what happens with Google Sheets and Google Forms is the titles that would show up here are exactly the titles off the page. So this said ESP quick quiz score brackets, and it gave the link and all that stuff sort of was there all at once. So I just kind of cleaned up the titles. It should be pretty obvious what each one is. I've also added in a new column right at the start, column A, called entry, and just assigned an individual number to each unique entry in the database. The reason I want this is if you look around through the data, you'll see sometimes there's values that maybe don't make a lot of sense. In this case, the number 02, obviously it makes perfect sense to us, but if we're trying to, well, I'll show you, data sort. If we're trying to sort the data by that birthday, the value 02 does not appear with the 2's. So if the intent was, close that off, if the intent was to group all the 2's together to see if there is some sort of pattern there, this 2 won't show up with the others. So what we'll want to do is kind of go through and gently edit some of the data to make it fit with what the rest of the data looks like. So changing this to a 2, just a straight up 2, will make sense. Basically just type a 2 in, hit enter, it'll replace the 02 with the 2, and then it'll actually sort properly and group things as we want them to. As I go through the data though, I want to make sure that I make note of any modifications that I do. So as part of your write-up, I haven't mentioned this before, so I would say right at the very top, just have something that looks like this, entry adjustments / deletions. And if you do make any changes to the data that exists, just make a note of it. So I remove the zeros from day of birth for entries 5, maybe 320, 389, whatever they were. Just a quick sort of note to indicate this is what I did. Didn't actually take that entry out, but I made it sort of make more sense with the context of the rest of the data so that it would sort properly. I noticed in some of the towns, for example, that people were writing SoPo, I guess, for South Porcupine. Some other things where maybe they misspelled something, just kind of typing something in quickly. So we can sort of fix the spelling for the entries and just kind of list off the ones that we did. So those are kind of very minor changes, but we should make some sort of a note of them. Here I sort of gave some examples of possible reasons why you might actually delete an entry. In the one case, it could be just a duplicate. I accidentally actually left the form open so that it could allow for duplication. It could allow you to change your answer after you had submitted initially, in which case it gives you a duplicate of the exact same data essentially. In this case, maybe you delete a piece of data if there was, or delete a complete entry, excuse me, if there was no ESP score, because of course that's kind of the main piece of information, and obviously without it, that person's data doesn't really mean much to us. Another possibility, of course, would be if you got kind of garbage in, then we don't want to sort of include that and just delete the entire entry if there's a piece of data that's been skewed as to what it should actually look like. Okay, so that'll be your first activity, kind of going through the data and just kind of make some quick fixes to it, make a note of any fixes you do so that the data is consistent. Something like this one, phone number here for the surveyor number, no big deal. Surveyor number was just for my purposes to make sure I knew who had actually submitted or who had got people to submit data. So that's no big deal. You don't know what that value should have been, but it doesn't matter either. If you have something that may be kind of complete garbage, no, here's a good one, toaster oven under gender. In this case, you could either leave it alone, you could delete the toaster oven, but the rest of the data in the entry seems to make sense, and so I wouldn't delete it from the database overall, but probably we won't use toaster oven as a legitimate gender. Maybe just take it out entirely, leave it as a blank to indicate that the person chose not to indicate one of the options that we felt made sense. So again, that's the first step in going through this. Once you have the data kind of cleaned up a little bit so that the data that's there is valuable, you can start looking for patterns and try to find anything that might indicate somebody who has greater ESP than the average. Hey everyone, just a quick add-on here. I've opened up my copy, so this account's copy of the survey. So you sort of see it says copy of. This is not the one that says view only, so this is the one that I have access to actually edit. As I mentioned, if you want to edit individual entries, you can simply move to those entries, type over top of them, and the change will be made. I didn't mention, or I sort of mentioned quickly, sorting on the other video, or in the other part of the video, but you might want to look at it here because it will look a little different. So when I go to data now, so this data feature and the sort is probably what you're going to use primarily for kind of grouping things together and taking a look at them. So in this case, I'm going to sort by column C. Basically, I just got myself into column C, data, sort, and you can see all the entries for surveyor number 1 are together, followed by all the entries for surveyor number 2, and so on. Now obviously that one doesn't really help much, but it's just sort of showing that I can sort by any of the columns. Easiest is just to kind of get yourself to that column to start, then go to data and sort. The two options actually are A to Z, meaning smallest to largest, so alphabetically or numerically smallest to largest, or Z to A, of course. And then you see that you get all the kind of mixed up birthdays first and then the normal numbers that follow. There is one other option. If I place myself somewhere and press Control A, I highlight all of the data, and then going to that same data menu, I now have this sort range option that wasn't there before, that wasn't available to me before. When I choose to sort range, it allows me to sort of in 2 or 3 steps. So in this case, all of my data has header rows, so I don't want the titles actually being involved in the sorting, so I sort of want to indicate that. And then I can choose kind of different options here. So let's say I'm interested first and foremost in the town in which people reside. So I'm going to group by town first, and then I'm going to group by their ESP scores. So I can kind of look at town by town and determine, is there a town that seems to have larger ESP scores overall? And so in this case, town first, ESP score second, and I could sort again, ESP scores either increasing or decreasing. I don't suppose it matters too much. When I sort, hopefully, I see the cobalts are all together. I did not sort by ESP scores. So it does seem like this is a little temperamental, but data, sort, try this again, town first, and then by ESP score, and I'll go decreasing this time. And cobalt is there, and then the scores are decreasing as well. And whether that's really helpful, it allows me to sort of see, well, cobalt, yeah, I don't know, there's a pretty good distribution there. Coleman, a few higher score, only a few scores, but they are somewhat higher. Diamond, okay, for some reason, oh, look at this, diamond, spelled differently, spelled differently, spelled differently. So maybe some of the different diamonds could be sorted a little bit better if I had sort of a more consistent spelling to them. So anyways, whether that's going to be helpful is somewhat debatable. You might only be deciding to sort by the one column and then just kind of look at it. Here are all the cobalts, and look at them. Or here are all the people with birthdays on the first. Do I see any kind of consistency there? Yes, no. But do know that that second option of data, sort range, and getting multiple sorts in at the same time is an option as well. It might be more valuable for some things that have larger groups, like the age groups. There are a lot of 18, 17-year-olds on the database from what I could see. So perhaps if I was sorting by age, having the second sort in there would be valuable as well. So I could see, well, there's a large group of 17-year-olds, and they do have, let's sort of organize the ESP scores. Oh, they happen to have a lot of fives in that group. Is that valuable? Maybe, maybe not. But just sort of making the point that that's how we sort. I know some of you aren't that comfortable with spreadsheets yet, but that'll give you the sort of the primary tool for taking a look at the data and determining whether there are influencing factors here.